Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone and welcome to episode 274 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on what is post-traumatic stress disorder. And it is Saturday the 22nd of June 2024 as I record this. So today's episode is a really useful one, and it's something that definitely draws on my own personal experience from conversation with a friend, and it really does give us a deep dive and a look at what actually is post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, because everyone's heard of it from soldiers, and it's something that's very much in the public debate. But what actually is PTSD is something we don't really focus on. Like, we know PTSD is flashbacks, intrusive memories. Okay, but what else is it? What are the different areas that PTSD causes? And also, what actually are the causes of PTSD? So these are all really interesting questions that we focus on in today's episode. So I really like this one. It definitely draws on some of my own stuff, and I will also talk about a lot of other types of trauma that actually causes a PTSD, because PTSD isn't just limited to soldiers, and I think that's definitely like the massive myth about the condition, is that whenever we talk about it, at least in the public domain, it's always about soldiers, about veterans, but PTSD does affect a lot more people. So this is a really interesting episode and one I'm really pleased with. So, but you got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. So, moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and the first one is a particularly food for thought. New sleep study ignites brain cleaning controversy. If it's something that we spend a third of our lives doing, our knowledge about what sleep is for is surprisingly patchy. One idea, though, is that sleep gives us the chance to flush toxins and metabolic waste that is accumulated in the brain during the day. It's even been suggested that chronically poor sleep may contribute to Alzheimer's diseases, which is characterized by a buildup of toxin proteins. Recent work in Nature Neuroscience, led by researchers at the UK Dementia Research Institute and Imperial College London, now challenges the idea that waste clearance is a key function of sleep. If the team is right, there are potentially serious implications for ideas about treatments for Alzheimer's, as well as for our understanding of the fundamental functions of sleep. However, the methodology used in these new experiments has been questioned by some researchers in the field, leading to some fascinating debates. And if you want to read more about the studies, then you can head on over to the BPS Research Digest website. But I think there's two angles I want to look at here. So first of all, I want to look at what if the researchers are correct, and the idea that we sleep for our brains to get rid of these toxins. What if that is false? And then I also want to look at the methodology angle though, which is always quite funny, because whenever I talk statistics with my classmates, I always say, oh, I hate statistics, I hate methodology, I hate all of that side of psychology. To be honest, I actually do quite enjoy it. Like, I do like picking apart studies, or at least saying, oh, maybe they should have done that differently, maybe they should have done that differently. Because here's the thing, no study is ever perfect. Like, I was talking with my supervisor, and the first study I ran isn't Perfect. I think it's a lot better than I think it is, because I was talking, yeah, because my issues with my first study came from, like, the questions, measurement, precision, and, like, stuff like that, even though she was like, it's actually fine. If it wasn't good, I would have pulled you up on it, but I didn't. So first of all, what if this research is correct and sleep isn't about cleaning our brains up of these wastes? That's actually quite a groundbreaking argument because, as far as I know, in fact, year 8 was the first time I heard the argument. So when I was 12 or 13, so basically a decade ago. So this has been a popular theory for at least a decade. Okay, so if we need to rip up over a decade's worth of arguments, that means a lot of studies, a lot of treatments, a lot of everything we know when it comes to sleep has been built on this foundational theory. And if that foundational theory is wrong, then we've got to do a lot of research, mainly from two different angles. Firstly, okay, if this foundational theory is wrong, then we've got to research again and find out, right, where did we go wrong in thinking this? Yes, and also what is the true reason why we actually sleep? But then, if we look at these treatment options, okay then, so surely if this is a recommended treatment for Alzheimer's, there must have been some effect size. And if it was a big effect size, again, I'm not saying it is, I've not looked into the research specifics, yeah, but let's just say there's a sleep treatment for Alzheimer's and it has a large effect size. Okay, now we need to find out why. Why though? Because if this sleep treatment works and it's nothing to do with these toxin proteins, how does this have a big effect on Alzheimer's? So again, I'm just talking hypotheticals. Is this sort of research that we need to be thinking about? Because it's like selecting serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So we now know, because the serotonin hypothesis is thankfully as dead as ditch water, thankfully, because of Moncrief and Reed 2022. It's a brilliant paper. I love that paper. It's the only academic paper I would ever recommend because it's so brilliant. I love Moncrief's work though. She's amazing. Anyway, though, so that wasn't real science in the sense that, yeah, we had this research saying that SSRIs, they have an effect, but they don't take an effect for a month. The serotonin hypothesis is wrong. So why are SSRIs effective for depression treatment? Well, treatment. I don't think we've actually come up with a good answer, even though I'm pretty sure it's connected to the neurogenesis hypothesis. So I think that's the sort of direction we're going to have to go in when it comes to sleep, though. Like basically researching it and finding out why sleep treatments actually work for Alzheimer's. Secondly, methodology. Again, I always say this, like, to be fair, like, you've always got to make sure that you create a vigorous experiment that actually measures what you want it to measure and it measures it well. So you have good credibility and you have good reliability too. And because I've been talking of this one for quite a while, I'm going to move on to another one. But this one was actually a really good one. So, the second one is the silent inner world of endophasia. Do you often hear an inner voice? If you answered no, you may have what a team of researchers are dubbing anaphasia. Inner speech, verbal thoughts, or an inner voice, whatever name you would prefer, this phenomenon has been widely considered a universal aspect of human experience. However, recent research has challenged this idea. Now, a new paper in Psychological Science proposes a name for an absence of inner speech and finds that it affects people's cognitive performance on certain cognitive tasks. Okay, so a funny story about this one for starters. So when I was back at school, we were basically trying to describe the sort of like inner voice that you hear. So like when you think about thoughts, or when you're basically thinking inside your head, there's that sort of voice or that sort of thing though. And it was actually quite weird to try and explain it to friends because even though they knew what I meant, it's just how you describe it or your lack of vocabulary in the English language to describe that inner voice. It does make you sound quite weird though, and it does make you sound a bit schizophrenic. So for school children, that was quite weird and quite funny though, to actually struggle like that much. So, but an inner voice. Yeah, like I've known two people in my life that can't imagine stuff, so they have like lack of imagination, and I completely forget the actual term for that. But a lack of an inner voice, I think like that's a new one. I've not come across that one before, but as I can imagine how it would negatively impacts people's performance on certain cognitive tasks. So because sometimes you do need to run it through your inner voice, sometimes you do need to think about it inside your own head. So I think if you have a lack of that, then that would be quite hard though. Interesting and just really weird, and I feel sorry for those people. Like sometimes I have. Okay, now I know I'm going to sound really strange, but sometimes you can have some quite nice conversations inside like your like own head, or you can be really sarcastic inside your own head and make jokes about people and that you just can't say out loud. So the final one is elsewhere on the web. Neuroscience News takes a peek at squeaks and growls made by newborns. New research shows that many of these playful noises are non random, with 40% of baby sounds recorded appearing in distinct clusters. This suggests that these adorable cues are more formal sound making practices, which prepares babies for language acquisition. Okay. Okay, so speaking of babies, I was working a outreach event today at my university. The other day it was like a family day for year 7 and 8 students, so 12 and 13 year olds, and this family brought a baby. We were all in awe, like baby was really cute and like the baby was really like popular. So all I can say about this psychology news article is that I always quite like developmental psychology research because I always like the applied stuff more, just because you can see it in like the real world. So whenever you see like baby necks and whenever they're making like lots of really adorable cues, they're like, to be honest, I think a really good question would be, are they actually trying to talk at you? Because yes, these are more formal sound making practices that prepares them for language acquisition. But we all joke about, oh yeah, like the babies are trying to talk in terms of like baby language. Wouldn't it be cool if they actually are? Like that, I think would actually be like quite good though, because I mean, like all that language is a bunch of sounds in distinct clusters, so it'd be interesting to see like is baby language actually real though. So I know I'm going off on a slight tangent now, but that would just be really interesting. Plus, something else I would notice that this was only 40%. So 40% of baby noise is recorded appearing in distinct clusters. Is that actually high? I think it sort of is, but it also means that 60% of baby noises aren't in distinct clusters. So I think this pops up two questions. One, do we have an inability to recognize other forms of baby speech? Let's just go with that term for now. Okay, then. And if we do, how do we improve it? How do we become better at recognizing these formal sound making practices? Yeah, but then on the flip side, is it more of a case that 60% of baby noises are just random sounds and the baby's just trying to get our attention. To be honest, whatever the case, babies are still cute. So, I hope you enjoyed the psychology news section as much as I did. Let's move on to the person update. So we're moving on to the personal update. So this week has been very busy and very good though, because what I'm doing at the moment is that even though I'm still working on my psychology study, which I'll circle back to in a minute. Well, last week I went to North Wales. Well, Wales, it's a really beautiful area, beautiful country. Well, I do love the developed nations, the UK, and Wales is really nice. It's really beautiful, really friendly people, and the towns are really great too. Though, so we did lots of hiking. I canoed over the world's highest navigatable aqueduct, so that's really good. Though I really do recommend that, and Wales was just a lot of fun. Also, I did take a psychology book that were because my supervisor wanted me to read this specific one. I'm halfway through. I and I've not read it for a good week, to be fair. So I've actually got to go back to it because it's all about how to do more detailed, more focused thematic analysis. So that book I really do recommend. It's a thematic analysis, a practical guide by the two main authors of thematic analysis. I can't remember the names off the top of my head, and I'm not actually sure where the book is in my bedroom, even though I'm literally in my bedroom now, though. So if you're interested in qualitative research, definitely get that book. I really do recommend it. And also this week, I've started what's known as the summer core period at my university. So what this is that as a student ambassador, I'm basically working every day for the next 4 weeks on lots of outreach events. So events that promote the idea of higher education to students from schools that have a below the national average number of students that go on to higher education. That's today this week I've mainly been working with year 8s. I've done fingerprinting. I've made dancing robots with Lego kits, stuff like that. Next week I'm working a World Languages Day, so we're promoting language learning at university. And then I'm also working a care leavers event for care experience as children. So lots of different events. So lots of different events, and yes, not all of it's psychology related, but it's still really good. It's still a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying it. And next week I'll be moving into a new student house for the next academic year, though. Which is why next Monday you have a very fun podcast episode coming. We'll focus on what should a couples talk about before they move into together. So even though me and my best friend we're not together, I still thought this was a really good study to look at, and it's just really fun. It's definitely a slightly longer podcast episode, but it is fun though, and I think that anyone who is thinking about moving in with a partner, or to be honest, a friend, should definitely think about it before they do it. So as always, I always love to know your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment out of the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And today's episode has been sponsored by Cognitive Psychology, a guide to neuroscience, neuropsychology, and cognitive psychology. So the reason why this is a really good fit for today's episode is because PTSD, it doesn't include a lot of flashbacks, a lot of cognitive things, a lot of psychological aspects. It includes thinking biases, processing trauma, because trauma impacts the brain, the cognitive processes, a person's memory, and a people's perceptions. So with this fascinating, really easy to understand book, does a massive deep dive into the topic. So by the end of this book, you'll understand what cognitive psychology is, how does a memory work, how does thinking work, including also thinking biases, how does perception work, vision work, and so many other really good topics. So if you want a great guide to the great area of cognitive psychology and to get a really firm, solid basis under you about what this field covers, then definitely check it out. So that's cognitive psychology, a guide to neuroscience, neuropsychology, and cognitive psychology. Available at all major ebook retailers, and you can get the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, local bookstore, or local library if you request it. Or you can get the audiobook version narrated by artificial intelligence at selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and selected library systems like Overdrive, Baker & Taylor, and Biblioteca. So, whilst buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as always, a massive thank you to my patrons, as your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. So if you wanted to become a patron of the show and get access to tons of great rewards, now you can at patreon.com/the Psychology Hour podcast. Or if you wanted to support the podcast on a one-off basis, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Con Whiteley. So that's enough for the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about what is post-traumatic stress disorder. This is an episode I'm really excited about, and I really do just want to dive into it because this is a lot of fun. Yes, it's dark, and I can definitely say PTSD. You do not want it. It's a very annoying condition. It really, really is. And yes, it is just, yeah, it does pop up a lot at times. So it was really good to actually look into this though. And I actually do talk about why I'm talking about this in a minute. But first, what is post traumatic stress disorder? So, as you can imagine, PTSD is a mental health condition classed as a trauma and stress related disorder that can develop in response to being exposed to an event or ordeal where severe physical harm or death was threatened or happened. That's a very important distinction there. People can develop PTSD after rape, violence, bombings, shootings, military service, and rescue workers can develop PTSD too. In terms of prevalence rate, I talk more about post-traumatic stress disorder in sexual violence populations briefly in a moment, but about 6.8% of Americans develop the condition in their lifetime, and that information is from the National Institute of Mental Health. Furthermore, PTSD can develop at any age, including childhood, and women are more likely to develop it than men. Also, there is some evidence that PTSD runs in families, as well as PTSD is often comorbid with conditions like depression, anxiety, substance use disorder. Then, when these other conditions can be diagnosed and treated, the likelihood of the overall treatment being successful increases. In addition, something we need to know about PTSD is that you can only get diagnosed with the condition if you have PTSD symptoms for over a month. If you have the symptoms for less than a month, then you don't have a PTSD, at least in diagnosis terms. Instead, you have acute distress disorder, which I admit sounds really, really weird, and originally I was quite against that distinction, but then when I looked into the sexual violence stuff, that made a lot more sense. Also, with the right care and support, a lot of PTSD symptoms can abate within trauma survivors within the first month, so a lot of people never go on to develop PTSD. Interestingly, post-traumatic stress disorder can be delayed in its manifestations because this occurs if PTSD symptoms show themselves 6 months or more after the onset of the trauma. Post-traumatic stress disorder and the military. I definitely couldn't do a podcast episode that focused on PTSD without talking about the military, as this is where a lot of our common knowledge about PTSD comes from. So, the prevalence rate of PTSD in the military is moderately high because about 30% of the Vietnam War veterans developed PTSD, and 10% of the soldiers who took part in Operation Desert Storm, which was the Gulf War, developed PTSD, as well as between 12 and 20% of the soldiers serving in the Iraq War developed PTSD too. As you can imagine, it is the combat element that increases the risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder for veterans, amongst other mental health conditions, because severe harm and death happens around them. There are other risk factors too, including the politics surrounding the war, the type of enemy the soldiers faces, and where the war is fought. All of these risk factors that can interact to cause post-traumatic stress disorder to develop and to be maintained in a soldier. Moreover, there is a type of trauma that is never spoken about in the military, and this is military sexual trauma, and sexual assault or sexual harassment connects to this topic too. This can suddenly cause post-traumatic stress disorder, since military sexual trauma can happen to both men and women, regardless of whether it's wartime, peacetime, or during training, with figures suggesting 23% of women have been sexually assaulted in the US military, and 55% of women and 38% of men have been sexually harassed in the military too. Personally, I suspect that number is a lot higher, because no one likes to report this stuff and put it on public record. And I say that as a survivor myself. The people that make this research possible are amazing, and if you report it, then you have more courage than me, to be honest. Overall, there are a lot of different traumatic experiences that can lead to a person developing PTSD, including terrorist attacks, natural disasters, sexual assaults, and physical attacks. Post-traumatic stress disorder and sexual violence. Why am I talking about PTSD now? So a few weeks ago, leading up to Canterbury Pride in early June, I wanted to go by myself to a Warhammer event at my university with a Pride twist. I would be going alone, and I wanted to go because it'd be nice to meet some new people, get back into Warhammer, and it would be a good event. Yeah, I had a lot of social anxiety about this. I felt physically sick about going, and I had seen photos of the Warhammer group at my university, and there were some people there that were rather triggering for me. A lot popped up that week because of me wanting to go to this event, so I was really distressed. I texted my friend, and they mentioned I have PTSD, so naturally I poo-pooed it. I thought, no, I was not going to listen to them. Not that they knew it at the time. My friend didn't know I was poo-pooing them quite badly. Yeah, I thought about it, researched it a little, and I found more about that it's very common amongst survivors of sexual violence. So this was hammered home last week too when I went to Wales, because in the evenings my parents fell asleep on the sofa. I was still watching the crime drama that they had on, and it turned out the killer was getting revenge on her rapists. And the program started to show the implied rape scenes, so I got really distressed. I couldn't change the TV over, so I shouted and it was a bit messy. There were other reasons why I'm certain I have PTSD, and I'll probably sprinkle them throughout the rest of the episode to shows examples of this in real life. Anyway, the reason why I'm talking about PTSD now is because I want to understand it more, and it is scarily common. For example, Campbell 2009 looked at studies dating back to the 1980s and found between 17 and 65% of women who experienced sexual assault develop PTSD, as well as a peer-reviewed article from the University of Washington School of Medicine found that 81% of survivors had PTSD 1 week after their attack, and 75% of sexual assault survivors had PTSD a month after their attack. Lastly, an article from Very Well Mind in 2023 explained nearly 48% of survivors had PTSD a year after being assaulted. I also want to note here that the specific type of post-traumatic stress disorder that sexual violence survivors develop is known as rape trauma syndrome. So now we understand how common it is in another area besides military veterans. Let's explore the symptoms of PTSD in more depth. What are the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? So a lot of people with a PTSD tend to relive and re-experience the traumatic event or different aspects of it. There is a wide range of triggers, something I'm finding out more and more, but there are some common themes. For example, anniversaries of traumatic events and similar people, situations, or places can trigger the distressing memories. A similar person example for me was that my attacker was very fat and very overweight, so I am very, very triggered when I see a fat man. This isn't me being fat phobic, it's just fat people trigger my memories. In addition, PTSD causes a person to experience flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, disturbed sleep, anxiety, sadness, intense guilt, emotional numbness, outbursts of anger, and dissociative experiences. And whilst people with PTSD try to avoid situations that remind them of the traumatic event, they can still be surprised by what triggers them, and when these symptoms last longer than a month, a diagnosis of PTSD might be relevant. So now I want to look at the different types of PTSD symptoms. What are the avoidance symptoms of PTSD? Because no one with a post-traumatic stress disorder wants to be reminded of the traumatic event, we all avoid sudden triggers, so avoidance symptoms can include avoiding activities, places and people associated with the event, avoiding conversations, feelings or thoughts about the event. So, as I mentioned earlier, I avoid fat men like the plague because they remind me too much of my attacker, and I avoid any crime drama with sexual violence themes. Thankfully, I never watched Law and Order Special Victims Unit, because otherwise that would mess up a great program, because lots of people recommend it. What are the re-experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? So these can include experiencing intense emotions when you're reminded of the event, feeling or behaving as if the event was actually happening all over again, flashbacks, which I didn't actually know that classed as flashbacks, as I have horrific flashbacks, having distressing memories and bad dreams of the event, having dissociative reactions and / or loss of awareness of your present surroundings, having intense physical sensations when reminded of the event, such as feeling faint, feeling a loss of control, sweating, pounding heart, and so on. One of the ways that I've experienced these symptoms include very distressing physical sensations all over my body about how he was touching and doing things to me, and that's all I'm going to say about that one. I used to have this one a lot more, but thankfully it's mellowed out at least a little these days. I would have complete loss of awareness that worked with these physical sensations, so I would need to use grounding techniques to get me to focus back on the present instead of the memory. What are the reactivity and arousal symptoms of PTSD? So these can include feeling easily startled, excessive awareness, also known as hypervigilance, sleeping difficulties, including having trouble falling or staying asleep, difficulty concentrating, outbursts of anger, or being irritable. Now, an unfortunately good example of this area for me was during my statistics theory online exam in May. Since it was bad enough I couldn't concentrate enough to do any revision whatsoever until a week before the exam, as well as because the exam was online and made up of 40 multiple choice questions, my mind started wandering after question 20, was led on to a full on meltdown and a panic attack during my exam. That was not what I wanted. That wasn't nice, and thankfully I passed. It was only by 3 points, but a pass is a pass. What about the mood and cognitive symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? So these can include an inability to experience positive moods, a lack of interest in social activities, feeling detached and numb from things, having difficulty remembering an important part of the traumatic event, pessimism about the future. Yeah, that one definitely pops up from time to time. In terms of clinical psychology, one thing I do want to mention is that you can see why depression and anxiety are common conditions to find alongside PTSD. For example, a lack of interest in social activities and pessimism about the future, but they're both common in depression too. Going back to the personal example, I've already mentioned the social anxiety that I have about going to something new, and it's basically gotten to the point where I can't do anything new. Like I really, really just cannot. And even if I go to something that I've been going to before everything happened to me, it still takes quite a while for me to actually go there. Like, I remember sitting in the toilets for like 10, 20 minutes, just feeling so anxious before just going upstairs to this social group that I go to. And I've been going there since September. So, I mean, it's not nicer. And I mean, like, I'm not ashamed to admit that because I think that if I talk about it, someone might find that useful. Someone might realize, oh, right, like, this is normal. This isn't just a me thing. So, yeah, it's not nice. Are there other symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? So, some other symptoms of PTSD don't really fit into this other categories, and these include depersonalization, feeling that you're outside of your body, derealization, experiencing unreality of your surroundings. But these symptoms are rarer for people, but some clients can experience them. And also, I didn't put this in the blog post, but something I found really interesting about reading that was that I did this blog post a few days ago, and I'm thinking, wow, I mean, like, I kept this really light. I mean, there were so many more examples I could have put in here, and some of them are like some of them are really bad. But I mean, like, yeah, lots of this has happened, and I mean, like, multiple times, sometimes daily or weekly, to be fair. What causes post-traumatic stress disorder? So, whilst we don't know the definitive cause of post-traumatic stress disorder, we know that there are biological, psychological, and social factors that interact to develop the condition. Since PTSD causes changes in how the body responds to stress, so it impacts our stress hormones as well as neurotransmitters that carries information between our nerves. As a result, people who experience childhood abuse or other traumatic experiences are likely to develop PTSD months or even years after the trauma. Also, temperamental variables like externalizing behaviors or other anxiety difficulties can increase the risk of developing the condition too. Additionally, environmental factors can cause PTSD. For example, childhood adversity, family dysfunction, family mental health history, cultural variables, and more importantly, the more traumatic the event, the greater risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder. This is why witnessing atrocities and severe personal injury are major risk factors. Moreover, having maladaptive coping mechanisms, a lack of social support, financial stress, and family instability can all worsen the mental health outcomes for people with post-traumatic stress disorder. Personally, because my best friend is the only social support I actually have since my sexual assault, was other people just don't know how to help me, and the most important people in my life just want to pretend it never happened and that I'm perfectly fine. I'm seriously not. That can decrease my mental health a lot because I feel guilty towards my best friend because they're all I've got until my specialised counselling starts, and my best friend isn't always around. So sometimes I do have to do maladaptive coping just to survive. Having more social support is critical when it comes to PTSD. On the other hand, there are resilience factors that can decrease the risk of a client developing post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of these resilient factors are present before the trauma, and other resilient factors can become more importantly learned during and after the traumatic event. For example, seeking out support, including mental health professionals, finding a support group, feeling good about your own actions in the face of danger, being able to act and respond effectively despite fear, and having a coping strategy are all resilience factors that can help reduce the development of post traumatic stress disorder. Conclusion. So we've covered a lot of ground here when it comes to post-traumatic stress disorder, was we've looked at what is PTSD, how common is PTSD in the military and sexual violence survivors, what are the symptoms and what are the causes. After this episode, we've all deepened our knowledge about what this mental health condition is a lot. And I'm pleased that we've learned about PTSD more. Since PTSD is a horrible condition to have, but there is hope. There are treatments, and you can still live a long, happy life with the condition. Because even though I've been having panic attacks, distressing memories, distressing physical experiences, and so on, there are still happy, joyful moments in my life. Like, I love spending time with my best friends. I enjoy outreach work at my university, and I still love writing. So there are moments of positivity, and I focus on them. And another reason why I like today's episode is that I could start to see what I'm experiencing is normal, and it's a natural response to an extremely unnatural situation. I'm not a problem, and no one with PTSD is a problem. Therefore, I do want to conclude this episode by saying that if you ever meet, become friends with, or get to know someone with PTSD, offering them some social support that I should add accurately reflects the level of friendship, listening to them and signposting them to some mental health services could have a massive positive impact on that person, and it really could change their life for the better. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I know that I did because like something I love about this podcast is that you guys get me researching. You guys get me, or you guys give me an excuse to look up something that I'm interested in, do a podcast episode on it, and I'm actually able to take in this knowledge a lot better compared to if I was just to read something. So, massive thank you as always for listening, listeners. This was useful for me because like even today stuff is popping up. Like someone just said the word suck because I was eating king prawns, and normally you do just suck the meat and juice out of them, but I found that quite distressing. Like, yeah, like, I'll probably have like a small meltdown, to be fair, when I stop recording because I've said the word twice now, and I think that's gonna evoke. So yeah, this is just like it's not nice and it is annoying and not like annoying though. Like I have been thinking about, oh, maybe I should just get a diagnosis, and just it's just lots of stuff going on, but as I said, like there are lots of positive things that are going on at the moment. There's even on like the worst days, there's still positive stuff like going on, and that's something that I'm focusing on. Like I'm moving in with my best friends like a week today, so I'm more than happy, to be fair. So if you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, definitely check out Cognitive Psychology, a guide to neuroscience, neuropsychology, and cognitive psychology, available in all the usual places, and you can get the audiobook version, narrated by artificial intelligence, at all the usual places too, including Spotify. And if you want to become a patron of the show and support the podcast on a monthly basis, then please head on over to patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then please head on over to buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwhiteley.net. So have a great day and I'll see you next time.